this early morning show. I'm hoping the audio is getting out. I can't hear anything. As you can see, I'm doing some Pro Tools work. I've got a little bit of a deadline today, so I'm sort of cranking away on this. Not really all that much to talk about in terms of this sort of morning show, but it's interesting. I've spent the weekend thinking about perspectives on religion and spirituality, and it for me, it's interesting to think about because there's sort of the scientific atheistic viewpoint that I generally carry that would like to sort of divorce any sort of fundamental religious leanings from actual evaluation of the world based on observations and things like that. And I find one of the things I find quite interesting is people, not just myself, all over the planet, have a difficult time conceptually. Well, not conceptually. Conceptually, they have quite an easy time to compartmentalize spirituality and then eventually remove it. But they have a much more difficult time, I think, on an instinctual level to discount spirituality as part of everyday existence. So it got me thinking. Perhaps we cannot cleanly separate spirituality from sort of our more atheistic viewpoint of the world. Perhaps our analytical mind needs in a lot of ways to coexist with the spiritual. And yeah, I'm thinking about this. And I started to think, well, we have no problem understanding polarity. We have no problem, from the very fundamental physics of the positive and negative polars of the same magnet and all this kind of stuff. But we also understand that we have polarity in politics, left-wing thinking and right-wing thinking, and there seems to be a greater chasm than there has ever been, at least in my lifetime, between the left and the right, although that could just be perceptual reinterpretation. But we seem to instinctively intuit that left-wing thinking and right-wing thinking need to coexist. There are times, the left-wing is oftentimes characterized as lateral thinkers, visual processors, and all that kind of stuff. And, then you've got right-wing thinking, which is, fundamentally, there's a different calculus going on there. But we do understand that they're both hemispheres of the same societal brain, so to speak. And they do need to coexist. So I started to think, would that same reasoning apply to atheism and spirituality? Now, it seems like that would be a contradiction in terms. But there's a lot of things in life that are a contradiction in terms that seem to necessarily coexist. So, how do we rationalize the analytical scientific mind with one that craves spirituality? And we see a lot of this in advanced thinkers of our time getting involved in meditation and yoga. So there seems to be an innate understanding that is an essential ingredient to our psyche. But just because I love throwing a wrench out there in the works, can we simultaneously believe in God and not believe in God? Just understanding from a philosophical standpoint, it would be interesting to explore that notion that you could firmly believe in a supreme being and yet live your everyday life in a manner that indicates that you don't. If we take one of the greatest scientific minds of our century, Einstein, who was deeply rooted in theoretical physics, made the pronouncement, "I don't believe God placed dice with the universe." So there's an indication there, although I'd like to take a look at it further and see what Einstein's religious beliefs were. It's interesting. Just talking about it out loud now, I had never really investigated that. I'd be curious to see what his religious leanings were. But there is an indication that he doesn't believe physics should be cleanly divorced from spirituality. So that's interesting to me, and I think it's worthy of exploration. I think there are answers to our own societal polarization if we are open to that. I think we have to be, to a certain degree, open to hypocritical ideas, because then we can investigate them further and see if there are commonalities that we never really quite considered. So I wasn't even going to go there. I wasn't even going to do this because I got a deadline. I did get back to it. So it's like super quick. Usually I'm on here between 9 and 9:30. A little bit of a late start today. It was a very chaotic Monday. But we will continue to sort of pick at life, universe, and everything. So now, why am I touching on this coexistence of religious thinking and atheistic thinking? Well, it's because I started thinking about villains. So yeah, here's the tie back to storytelling, right? So we do understand innately that aggression and lust are wrong, right? Because of the eventualities of sort of allowing those two emotional states to exist without checks and balances, right? So, and primarily aggression is one of the key areas of psychoanalysis in terms of understanding criminal behavior and et cetera, et cetera. And lust is another side, the other side of the same coin. So I started to understand that, well, a lot of the ultimate sort of aims of understanding lust and aggression and, the 7 deadly sins in general is to understand those conditions of human behavior that cannot facilitate communal living or societal integration or whatever you want to call it. So then villains break those for very deliberate reasons. Now, are there a set of rules or conditions sort of opposite to that villains follow, right? So we can't just say villains love chaos purely for the sake of chaos. That's like us saying, we don't believe in aggression purely because we believe in peace, right? There's an underlying fundamental reasoning behind why aggression is considered negative. I mean, if we went to sort of biological terms, propagation of the species and things like that, aggression leads to violence, which leads to death, which prevents us from passing our genetic material on from generation to generation, and so on and so on. So there's a Darwinian drive. Actually, interesting when I say that out loud. There is a Darwinian reasoning for why we have aggression, but there's also that understanding that ultimately aggressive tendencies unchecked will not help support the propagation of the species, right? A very, very kind of rudimentary level. So what is that for villains, right? So villains, on the other hand, will probably give free rein to their aggression to achieve what biological end, what societal or communal end. I don't buy total chaos because I think that's sort of deus ex machina for the intelligent writer, right? So we need to kind of explore. There are goals. Perhaps the villain wants to achieve the same thing. Propagation of the species, but in a different way. So we look at a lot of, so for example, Magneto, his propagation of the species is the dominance of the mutant race. I mean, we can look at Hitler and the dominance of the Aryan race kind of thing. So is it that villains share a common kind of ethos with the good guys, except in a very narrow vision? I don't know. Maybe it's worth kind of exploring. It would be interesting if villains had the same sort of drives and motivations in terms of that the good guys do. There would be a wonderful sense of irony with that. But I do want to explore the opposite side. So if aggression and lust are the driving forces behind a lot of societal ills, what for a villain are the driving forces of their societal ills, and the the grand club of villains. When villains all communally gather, what do they discuss in terms of dangers to their society? Oh, there's something interesting there. So, what are they trying to avoid? What are they trying to sort of control? I mean, villains are classically, egotistical and they don't play well with others. Let's just say that. But it would be interesting to examine what it is that they're trying to achieve. What was the Legion of Doom trying to do? I mean, I refuse to believe that they were simply gathering together to simply defeat the Justice League. I think there was more to it than that. Oh, there was a question from Rian. You make music? Yeah, I do. I'm just currently, I'm working on a production for an executive producer, and what I'm trying to do is balance the soundtrack with the voiceover dialogue. So that's currently what I'm doing. I'm using Isotope's suite of tools to be able to kind of balance the audio, and I'm learning a lot because I've only done this once before, where I try to balance in the music so the music doesn't drown out the vocals or the voiceover, and the voiceover doesn't stomp all over the music. So it's quite interesting, and that's due today. So I'm going to be diving into that fairly soon. In terms of composing, I've only written 3 pieces inside of Pro Tools, and I'm experimenting with Cubase for the very first time. I've written another piece in Logic Pro, and I really love Logic. So what I've seen on the forums is that Cubase is very much like Logic. It's built for the music composer. So I'm like, okay, cool. I did enjoy composing inside Pro Tools, but Pro Tools is very pipeline oriented in terms of creating music. It's very sort of rigid within its structure. Not saying you can't be creative. Like I said, I enjoyed creating music inside of Pro Tools, but there are too many, I think, interruptions in the creative flow of making music where you have to attend to Pro Tools-y type stuff. So I'm hoping that when I get into Cubase, it's a little bit more free-flowing, and I'll be able to just get in there and compose. I had the similar experience in Logic where I could just sit down and just compose, and it was exciting. So yeah, music is another passion in my life. Yeah, so there we go. That's the morning show for today. I wasn't really going to do one, and here I just blathered on about religion and villains and supervillains, right? So I'm using this because I really want to craft a fairly fascinating, intelligent, and frightening bad guy, right? And I think the most frightening bad guys know so much. They're manipulating elements around them, including the heroes, unbeknownst to the heroes. They're actually devices in the villain's master plan. Of course, something goes disastrously wrong because of a miscalculation, due primarily in part to the way villains think, and then the good guy finally gets their opening, right? But I want to make that opening as small as possible in the story, almost to the point where it feels like sheer luck. But we'll get there. I'll throw some practical examples out there soon of existing villains and villains that I'm currently working on, and the dialogue that shapes them and all that sort of stuff. So I better go because the Pro Tools is calling me, and I will catch up with you guys later. Thanks for checking in. I'll talk to you later.